Good evening, everyone here in India, and a very good morning in US. I am Krishna Pandey, Assistant Professor, DME Media School, Delhi Metropolitan Education, Noida, and I welcome you all to the world's first 10-day Digital Live International Conference, second edition 2021 on Information, Communication, and Artificial Networks, ICAN4, hashtag Communication Redefined. Organized by DME Media School, Delhi Metropolitan Education, Noida, affiliated to Guru Gobind Singh Indraprasth University, New Delhi, India. The conference is supported by Indian Council of Social Science Research, Government of India, and is in collaboration with School of Communications and Creative Arts, Faculty of Arts and Education, Deccan University, Melbourne, Australia. With knowledge partners, Adamas University, Kolkata, K.R. Mangalam University, Gurugram, Makhanlal Chaturvedi, National University of Journalism and Communication, Bhopal, and Vigyan Prasar, Government of India. The conference academic partner is Department of Communication and Journalism, Guwahati University, Guwahati. An international partner is Institute for International Journalism, E.W. Scripps School of Journalism, Ohio University, USA. ICANN's media partner is the Policy Times. The conference is also supported by SPARK, Students with Positive Attitude and Resonating Communication, the Student Council of DME Media School, and official newsletter of DME Media School Journalism at DME, which is a fortnightly publication covering all the major activities happening in and out of the campus. The conference is also supported by Asian Media and Cultural Studies Network by Sean Redman, and Australia India Film Practitioners and Researchers Network by Dr. Vikrant Kishore. Beginning from July 1 till July 10, 2021, the conference is already in the midway with 3 special sessions, 4 technical sessions, 1 panel discussion, 6 master classes gone by. We are here in the 7th master class. There are many more such sessions to come. Overall, the conference has 36 brainstorming sessions, including 9 master classes, 10 panel discussions, 4 workshops, and 3 special sessions and 9 technical sessions. These sessions have 60 eminent experts and scholars participating from 5 continents and 11 countries, including South Korea, Malaysia, Singapore, Bangladesh, USA, Mexico, France, Italy, Australia, Ghana, and not to miss the home country, India. The conference is divided into 2 sections: brainstorming sessions, which has representation from 18 city-states in India, 18 national international universities, 10 institutes of higher learning, 40 academicians, researchers, 20 professionals from media industry. The second section is technical session, which has participation from 20 cities in India, 30 national international universities, 20 institutes of higher learning, 100 plus academicians and researchers presenting their papers, and 20 professionals from media industry. Now I call upon Professor Dr. Amrish Saxena, Dean DME Media School and Director of DME Studios and Production, Director Coordinator of IQAC and Director of International Relations to introduce the session. Over to you, sir.
This evening session, Evening in India, is being organized to discuss the PR, the current scenario, particularly in the backdrop of this COVID-19. And as Krishna ma'am already told everybody, today is the 5th day and this is the last session of the day. We have been holding panel discussions, master classes, workshops, and technical sessions. And it has been a great learning experience for everybody, for the teachers, for the students, and for researchers and scholars. And I hope this session, because this is again a master class, and this will be a master class in the real sense, because in the BJMC we have this whole paper on public relations. And this aspect of public relations, which is going to be discussed in this session, will be of great learning experience for all the students. So I wish that this session will be fruitful for everybody. With this, I stop here and over to you, Krishna.
Thank you so much, sir, for setting the tone of the master class. So today we are here to begin with the master class on PR in the time of COVID-19. A most pertinent topic, The COVID-19 pandemic has affected every corner of the world. The virus impacted individuals and industry alike. Even the public relations industry could not escape from its ramification. The masterclass will deliberate upon impact of COVID-19 on the industry per se. To take the session forward, we have two eminent experts, Ms. Kathryn Lancioni, who needs no introduction. She is an internationally recognized expert in the field of public relations. With more than 25 years of experience in the industry, Ms. Lancioni worked as a journalist, public relations executive, communication strategist, and college professor. She has been instrumental in aiding domestic and multinational companies conquer their market research, branding, public relations, and investor relations challenges. Ms. Lancioni has worked with some of the world's leading PR agencies, including Edelman, Ogilvy, and Weber Shandwick. After nearly a decade in agency world, she moved to academics, teaching the nuances of public relations to students in colleges and universities across the United States. Ms. Lancioni is the author of 3 books, Communication Research, Public Relations, The Changing Global Landscape, and The Practice of Public Relations, all published by Kendall Hunt. Sharing the Zoom platform with her is Dr. Pooja Arora, who is a senior public relations and corporate communication professional at a private organization. With an industry experience of over 11 years in varied sectors, Dr. Arora has worked closely with regional, national, and international media, helping them get new story angles while meeting their deadlines. She specializes in adding a human touch to corporate stories, managing crisis, and devising media strategy. She is also involved in teaching on the basics of public relations to undergraduate students. She was recently awarded as the Educator of the Year by Exchange for Media, a leading advertising and PR platform in India. I warmly welcome you both and invite you to take the session forward. The session will be followed by question and answers moderated by Dr. Pooja Arora. Participants are requested to fill the registration and feedback form mentioned in the chat box. Over to you, Dr. Pooja Arora.
Thank you, Ms. Pandey. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the masterclass on PR in times of COVID-19. Well, before we begin, I would like to thank Dr. Amrish Saxena and Dr. Sushmita Bala for organizing this session. I think, I can clearly say one thing, that both of you are the real image makers of DME. So congratulations and thank you for organizing this insightful 10-day conference.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Pooja.
So moving on, like Ms. Pandey said, I am Dr. Pooja Arora, and I have been working in the field of public relations for over 11 years. And today I'm joined by Ms. Kathryn Lancioni from USA, and she's an author of 3 amazing books on public relations. She has over 25 years of experience. She's a researcher, and she's also the one who ideated this particular research that we're going to talk you through or take you through. So can we have the presentation, please, now? Okay, so next slide, please. Okay, so before we move ahead, here is a quick agenda of the masterclass. Okay, so firstly, we're going to talk about the introduction. We're going to give an overview of why we did this research, then the demographic data, a little bit about the sample, the kind of people we reached out to globally, who they are, all of that. Changes, all of you have seen changes during the pandemic. So what happened in the field of public relations is something that we've captured in this presentation. Then what are the suggested PR strategies and tactics? Later on, moving on to the future of public relations, as well as the recommendations for businesses and students. So, this is all something that we've captured through our research. Next slide, please. Okay, so before we proceed, Kathryn and I wanted to ask you this question. Okay, so imagine that your boss or teacher asks you about a topic during a virtual meeting or a virtual class, which is completely unknown to you. What will you do if you have to provide her the answer? Now, I want everyone to write down in the chat box, and even the faculty members who are there. So please start writing. Let's make it a little engaging, guys. Thank you. Everyone, please contribute. Not just the students, this is for everyone, even the faculty members who are participating. What will you do? You have to answer this question and you don't know about this particular topic. So how will you answer? What will you do? Will you open your laptop? Will you open your phone? Will you open up a book to find out the answer? What will you do? Anyone? No? Okay. So what I and Kathryn would probably do would be that we would research, and we would research about that particular topic on our phones quickly, because that is what is the best thing about virtual meetings or virtual, the sessions that we do. So I think, so don't you guys agree that virtual meetings are way better than face-to-face meetings? Yes? Anyone? Yes, yeah, I can see Ishika saying that, yes, I will search on Google, ask a friend to send the answer through WhatsApp. Absolutely, Ishika, you're right. I think this is exactly what all of us will do, but this is not possible if you were in a face-to-face setting. Imagine, your teacher is there just the way you're seeing in this particular picture. If your teacher is in front of you, you can't do that research, right? So that is the best thing about a virtual meeting. So that is what we wanted to know. Next slide, please. Okay, Kathryn, over to you for a quick introduction.
Okay, good morning, everybody, and thank you for morning my time. Good evening to all of you, I should say. And again, just thank you everybody at DME for all their support and all these, and giving Dr. Pooja and I the opportunity to present our research here. It's tremendous. So let me start with how we got here. Probably January, February of this year. Dr. Pooja and I had collaborated on a bunch of things. And I said to her, I said, I had this idea. I was curious as to how COVID was affecting PR in India, because I was seeing how it was affecting PR in the United States after talking to colleagues here and talking to colleagues in different parts of the world. Everyone realized that things had not just slowed down, but they had changed. And the question that we wondered was, A, how had they changed? And B, more importantly, what were the long-term ramifications of the pandemic on our industry? So we decided that we would try to get a pulse of folks in the industry from around the world. So we cast a very large net using a variety of means. I went through LinkedIn, through my contacts, and from some local people here. And Dr. Pooja did the same, and she really did an incredible job of getting some great data from people all over India. And together we were able to draw data from an enormous, more than 14 countries around the world, people of all different skill levels. And we'll get into the demographics in a little bit. But what we found was that our hunch was right. The pandemic had disrupted the way that organizations use PR. And it wasn't necessarily a bad thing. As you'll see in the data, there were some good things that came out of the pandemic as far as our industry, but there were also a lot of things that kind of halted. And what we also found was that the skill set required to be a successful communications professional has evolved at a pace that's gone a lot faster than we all thought. If everybody remembers, March of 2020, March 11th, the world shut down. The world came to a screeching halt. And it was weird. If you watch CNN or the BBC or any of the global news networks, you saw pictures of very, very, famous places all around the world with no one. And it was a very lonely place. And that's a really hard thing for PR people, because part of our industry is being face-to-face in person with other people. establishing relationships, building relationships, and using those relationships to create stories about companies. So for our industry, one that's based on interpersonal relationships, it caused a big hiccup for a lot of people. And so a lot of folks had to recalibrate onto how were we still going to do what we do and what we love in a world where we can't be together. And obviously digital communication has played a big role. This masterclass is going to provide insights from PR practitioners all around the world on how the pandemic changed their approach to PR and how it's going to impact the industry going forward. And the data was gathered between a period of March to May of 2021. Dr. Pooja, anything else you want to add?
No, I think we are good.
Okay, perfect. All right. Okay, this slide. So we had PR professionals, as I said, from 14 countries around the world, ages between 25 and 60. 48% were male and 52% were female, and they were from a variety of sectors. And you see on the bottom here and on the map as well, the countries included the US and India, the UK, Philippines, Italy, South Africa, Botswana, Ghana, Serbia, Malaysia, Germany, Switzerland, Singapore, and New Zealand. And I think it's important to say that also these folks were from all industries. We didn't focus on just tech or healthcare or consumer. Everyone that participated in this came from literally all facets of the PR industry. So the data is it's not super. It applies to the whole industry because of the people that responded to it. Okay, next slide. Dr. Pooja?
Yeah. Okay, so again, we are back with another question. Before we move ahead, a quick question for everyone in your life because of the word anything. And if you see the picture on your right, it's not a me, but I can truly relate to it.
So the next slide that we have here makes us all think about the effect of COVID on us. Okay, as we said with our industry, it caused us all to reset and to rethink. Okay, how can we do what we do? And we'll get to the data on that next in the next slide. But for everyone on the call, think about COVID. Not the bad stuff, but what positive changes came in your life because of virtual classes or meetings. And I'll tell you for myself, I actually learned to like this technology. I was somebody that hated Zoom meetings prior to COVID. I saw no need to talk to anybody face to face. If I wanted to talk on video, if I wanted to do it, I would do it in person or I would do it over the phone. But COVID forced me to learn how to do this and actually enjoy it. And now I've got to tell you, when I do a meeting with people and they don't want to do it on Zoom, it's really strange to me because I just expect everyone to want to do this. So let's see in the chat what people came up with. So what we found in talking to these people all over the world was there were a couple of big changes that COVID-19 brought onto our industry. The first thing was the focus, and this is a big one, the focus really shifted to COVID-related news. So companies were no longer able to just announce a product or announce a new service. Everything focused on how XYZ company or industry has been affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. Another big thing was there was a shift from print to online. Oh, Dr. Pooja, you're joining us. You're back. Okay, the second big influence or change was there was a huge shift from print to online. And this is something that was going on originally anyway in the industry. It's similar to how retail globally has gone in a big downturn. But with COVID-19, people were pitching primarily online publications because, again, we did not have this opportunity for the face-to-face interaction in person with journalists from print publications. Dr. Pooja, do you want to chime in?
Sure, definitely. I think I would just like to say one thing that, earlier when we started, I remember there were some organizations who used to struggle getting any kind of stories. And these were especially the ones who wanted their CSR or philanthropic work covered in the media. They were just not interested. And the media before COVID hit us was only primarily interested to write on business. And post the pandemic, everything changed. Everything was about COVID. Everything was about what are the efforts, what is the response of organizations against COVID. So, I mean, these were the things that were happening. And another thing that simultaneously happened was change from print to online. And this was very much connected with COVID, because earlier, giving one story to a leading print publication was considered to be like the main thing. If you've given one story to a big publication like an Economic Times, Times of India, then you're done for the month. But post the pandemic, because organizations were not getting that mileage in print publications, and even the media houses were shutting down, they started looking to the online platforms. And I think this is the reason why there has been such a boom. People are opting for social media platforms. The volume of virtual meetings, tours, conferences, all of that has increased because everyone has realized that it saves a lot of time, cost of the organizations as well as people. Press conferences that were earlier arranged, it involved a lot of logistics. You had to beautifully design an invite, book a venue, maybe in a 5-star hotel, take care of the food, maybe the printouts of the press releases or the media kit, or organize cabs. So a lot of money was wasted there. But I think with virtual press conferences specifically, people have realized how much cost is getting saved. So that is one change that everybody saw. Then I think there was one important point, and I think Kathryn also mentioned it earlier, that the PR practitioners across the globe said that one thing that changed for them was that they were not able to establish that right connection or right relationship, or the what do you say, the right connect with the journalist as well as the relevant stakeholders. So they were not able to do that. So you'll also see that in the following slides, on the relationship factor. Then the other points talks about how the working hours suddenly became longer. I remember when I was studying in college, there were some friends of mine who said that, I want to get into a 9-to-5 job, and that's about it. So during the COVID pandemic, the lines or the timings actually got blurred. There was no fixed time. And I think still there is no fixed time. Everybody is working 24/7. So that is another thing. Then I think the important PR tool, when PR started decades back, it's the first PR tool that was adopted was the press release. And I think it's completely losing its charm now, because the actual PR tool that's being used right now is social media. Everybody wants to go ahead with that. Everybody wants to have their campaigns on social media first. So that is the priority now. Yeah, Kathryn, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that, despite the fact that the press release has become a lot less popular, it's in terms of releasing it, as Dr. Pooja was saying, with the cost associated with it and the complexity, writing is still a critical skill. And we're going to get to that later on in the presentation. Many companies will still draft a press release and have one around to provide additional information. Or what they'll do is they'll release it on social media. So they'll do a social media release. Just because the release often provides more information than a tweet or a post on Instagram would do. But it's important to point out that the shift away from the press release signifies a huge shift in the industry, and it also signifies a huge shift in the pace of the industry, because what we're seeing globally is that companies are dropping, as we say, with music, in the US we say we drop it, but they release it, they do usually a drip campaign via social media for the launch of their product. And they usually couple that with some sort of Instagram campaign with an influencer. And maybe they'll have a couple of stories. But where the focus used to be on the press release, the meeting with the journalist, get everything set, and then releasing it, now everything happens almost in a blink of an eye.
Okay, so I think this is a very interesting slide. We asked this question to the practitioners across the globe, as in, whether their life and became harder or easier, or what were the kind of changes they saw. Well, the changes in the PR industry, were they harder, easier, both, or they didn't witness any change? And if you see the responses, it actually talks about the different sectors that they belong to, and whether it was harder for them, easier for them. So if you see the first one, harder, it actually includes almost all sectors. Then if you come to easier, it mainly talks about the people who were doing celebrity or political PR. Then for both, it was the people who were involved in multiple sectors, who were not just doing PR for, say, technology sector, but they were also involved in doing health, technology, e-commerce. So, they had a mixed opinion. And obviously the people who were part of the corporate communications department, because they could manage their organization's PR with a lot of paid stuff. So that is where they said it was both easy and hard. The one sector that said, or two sectors rather, they said that there was no change. The PR practitioners belong to philanthropy and technology. And I think this is quite interesting, because this is quite reflective of the fact that we were talking about in the beginning, that how CSR stories or philanthropic stories were being ignored, and now they were, given precedence. And if you see the chart on the right, sorry, so 61% said that their life was harder. The change was harder for them. Then 10% said easier, and 24% both, and 5% of PR practitioners said no change. Sorry. Kathryn, do you want to take up the next slide?
Sure, absolutely. Okay. So again, we had people from over 14 countries around the world participate. And what you see here is a country by country comparison of how changes due to the pandemic impacted PR professionals in those countries. So in Botswana, it was reported that it was both hard and easier. So it made some things easier and some things harder. In Germany, and I know exactly who this is, he said that it was 100% harder to do what he needed to do. And he's a very senior PR person. Ghana, same thing, both easier and harder. India, it was interesting. We had nearly 70% of people said it made their job harder. But then again, you had, between 10 and 15% that said it kind of went both ways. New Zealand, again, 100% harder. The Philippines, it was both. And some said it was a bit easier. Serbia, Singapore, South Africa, all agree that it made their job a lot harder. And then interestingly enough, in Switzerland, the UK, and the US, they said that it made it harder. So I think what you're seeing here is, on balance, if you asked most PR professionals, did COVID-19 make their job harder and easier? The sort of answer that most would say is harder. Some would say easier. And I think the easier category comes into play, and we'll get to some of the responses to the specific questions, but in terms of meeting people, like setting up a quick meeting, obviously it's easier to do it through a Zoom call. But in terms of the nuances of what we do and how we do it, hands down, it has made the profession a lot tougher over the past year and a half. Okay, next slide. So this was one of the questions that we put on the survey. And again, harder or easier? Has the COVID-19 pandemic made your job easier or harder, and why? Ann Tenbrook, who is I would say, senior PR professional from the United States, she wrote, "The pandemic has made me think out of the box a lot more than before. In the pre-pandemic era, we had a set formula for what would work, and we followed it for a long time without too many changes. But the pandemic changed the game and pushed us all out of our comfort zone, forcing us to innovate. In a profession like PR, relationships are very important. In-person meetings and events are key to the relationship building process with stakeholders, because there is so much opportunity for informal conversation and getting to know the other person. Obviously, that's been affected since it's been much harder to have those informal conversations over a Zoom meeting, which are much more agenda driven. And I have to say, you know, one of the things that I've always really enjoyed doing in the industry is media relations, and developing and building those relationships with journalists over time. And some of my most successful relationships with journalists at, you know, the Washington Post, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, the FT, came through those informal conversations. It didn't come from me pitching a story to a reporter. It came from me asking them how their weekend was over a latte at Starbucks. So when Anne mentions this, it's not just a mention, it's a huge deal. And it's been really, really hard for anyone in the PR industry, but especially people like me who sort of thrive and really enjoy the media relations aspect. Dr. Pooja, anything you want to add? No? Okay, next slide. All right. Has the COVID-19 pandemic made your job easier or harder? Why? And here we have from Malaysia. I can't say if it has made it easier or harder. It made me change the way I do work and the way we interact with clients. Our communication strategy had to be changed. Creative elements such as graphic design are now required to support traditional ways we communicate. Traditional text now needs graphics and video to ensure messages are clear to target audiences. Dealing with the media has also changed, as they are more demanding than before, and there are also just less publications to target. And we talked about this a little bit a few slides back. There's been globally a huge consolidation in the media industry. Print is still around in some areas, but most publications have transitioned to online. And even if they do have a print publication, all the breaking news comes on the website. So what it's done to the PR industry is it's made there less contacts for all of us to go after. And in addition, reporters now have expanded beats. So an example is somebody might have been covering one section of the auto industry. Now they have to cover the whole thing. Someone may have been covering one section of the technology industry. Now they have to cover the whole tech industry, which we all know is huge. So that was already going on. But then you have the pandemic where you can't even go out and see the people that you've had these relationships with, and many of which have, lasted decades. And the natural thing is kind of out of sight, out of mind. So what COVID did, as is mentioned here, was it made everyone rethink of, okay, how do we still stay top of mind with these reporters in a time where we can't really see them? And how can we still successfully target customers who are also probably thinking about something else? So being creative, being edgy, doing the unexpected has really become a part of this industry over the past 18 months. Next slide. Okay, Dr. Pooja, do you want to start with this one?
So, we asked this question during our research that, were there any permanent alterations that are here to stay, as part of the field of public relations? And there were many, actually. So many practitioners felt that virtual events have now become a norm. And, because like we said earlier, they save a lot of time and cost, and even organizations have realized it. So, despite the fact, and even post-pandemic, if everything gets back to what it was earlier, people would consider having virtual events because of the benefits attached to it, and face-to-face meetings will reduce. Now, while, Kathryn and I have been talking about the relationship building face-to-face meetings and how important they are, but the practitioners feel that, given that it's not always possible to travel from, say, one state to the other every time, so people would prefer to have these virtual meetings even after the pandemic is over. So that was another point. In organizations specifically, they would travel less for their business meetings. So, earlier we used to travel to different states. So if there is an event in Chennai, there's an event in, say, Singapore, we are traveling for that. But, because of virtual meetings, virtual conferences, all of that will reduce. And, the business meetings can easily be arranged virtually. And I think everybody has seen that already. Then I think the next point talks about how the organizations realized that internal communications is important to enhance the employee morale as well as a connection with them. So I think post the pandemic, the practitioners who participated in the research said that the internal communication catered towards enhancing employee morale will also increase. Then I think before the pandemic, crisis communication was one strategy that was adopted, whenever there was a crisis. So, but I think now everybody understands what crisis is and what to do. And I think that will become a part of the PR strategy or a business strategy or a communication strategy, even post pandemic. So, these are some of the changes that will continue to happen. And this is what the research talks about. Then social media, I think everybody loves to be on social media. Everybody, every organization wants to be heard. Everybody, this particular meeting is being live streamed on Facebook, because that is where, everybody connects to. And that is where you can populate or amplify your particular session or meeting or, particular work that you're doing. So that will also continue. There will be other important PR tools, but I think social media is the limelight right now and will continue going forward. And obviously the digital exchange of information will also happen. So, 6 years back, I remember giving hard copy press releases to the journalists while doing media rounds or maybe post press conferences. So, but now everybody wants a digital copy of a press release. So, this digital exchange of information will continue and will happen post pandemic. Last but not the least, and I think this is especially for the younger generation, the students who are attending this session, what is it that the senior PR people are looking for? They basically need youngsters to have or to understand the social media world, digital world, and so that if they are a storyteller, obviously this is not the only thing. So if they are a storyteller, if they know what to write, how to write, if they are good communicators, then they can actually connect and amplify their particular story or the organization story on the social media platform. So it's a good news for all the youngsters out there. Next slide, please. And Kathryn, over to you.
Yes. So another question that we asked on the survey was, how has the pandemic permanently altered the PR profession? And the woman from India said, it has influenced and will continue to influence the way work and relationships in organizations evolve. Working together is gradually giving way to individualistic tendencies of people, relying more on electronic gadgets to deliver work than on people. In turn, this makes the income divide more visible, as the poor and lower level workers who cannot afford the gadgets, energy, and data will continue to be left behind. And I have to say, when I read this quote originally, it really made me pause and think, because it's true. What we've seen and what we're going to see because of COVID and just because the way the world is evolving is the influence of the income divide is becoming a bigger and bigger problem. And it's all over the world. There's not one country, just like there isn't one country that's been, that hasn't been touched by the pandemic. There isn't one country that's been untouched by the income divide, economic, income divide. And so I think that's important to remember as you try to be a good PR professional and try to do your job is, help other people out. There are going to be times where you have access to technology or someone else has access to technology that you need or that you can help and give them. And I think that's really important to think about. Good stories are made through cooperation. And there are many times where you need the help of a source to get intelligence. You need a reporter to give you the time of day in order to get them to think about writing about it. And you need that executive to be nice and cooperate with you and agree to talk to the reporter. And sometimes the access to intelligence which can be retrieved, unfortunately, primarily through handheld devices these days. And that's been, again, something that's been fast forwarded by the pandemic, can sometimes put one person ahead of the other. So I think it's important that we all realize that some people have it easier than others do. And if you can lend a hand to somebody and help them write a good story, all the better. Okay, next slide. All right, so this one is on suggested strategies and tactics in COVID. So as we said, one of the big tactics that was really kind of dying out, we're starting to die out pre-COVID, was the press release. And I think that's the one that Dr. Pooja and I have seen has been the most affected globally due to the pandemic. But PR strategies and tactics in COVID, ways to get attention when the world was focusing on everything else but your client. First thing was to talk about what the company or your client's initiatives are relative to COVID. So if you're an airline, like in the United States, airlines like Delta or United, what are they doing to ensure the most safe environment for their customers? And you saw a lot of that here on the news. You would have the airlines be on CNN, or they'd be on MSNBC or the BBC, and they would show you pictures of how they were spraying down the cabins and trying to really disinfect as much as possible. So that was one thing that has become very important over the past 18 months is focusing on what is it that your company is doing to protect customers. And now the story has shifted. And now it's, well, what are companies doing to welcome back their customers, and how are they welcoming them back in a safe way? Another big thing that came out was that it's important to communicate the value of the business to stakeholders and the purpose of the brands. And if you were in my talk on the 3rd, so the day before yesterday, we talked a lot about this. During COVID, companies use PR to remind customers, consumers, of who they were and why they mattered. Because, most people didn't really have a need to buy that much during COVID. I mean, the work wardrobe shifted from business attire to yoga pants and to really, athleisure, that term that everyone seems to love. So brands, retailers, for example, that sell clothing, they really had to focus on reminding customers why they needed their brand in their life. Another thing that has come out was focus on storytelling. Change from trying to push the product to telling a story, and using social media and all of the many, many apps to help you tell that story. The key to successful PR these days is helping to communicate to a consumer how the brand is or can be part of their daily life, and why that brand makes a difference in their daily life. And that really seems to resonate, especially in the time of COVID. Another thing that has come out was adopting sort of a 360-degree approach. And you hear this a lot, but what this means is making sure that everything is connected: your digital marketing, your social media, and your traditional media. So to make sure that it's the same story, that we're all singing from the same song sheet. And again, we talked about this in my talk the other day, which is you can't have disconnected messaging. So it's important that your marketing efforts, that your social media efforts, and your traditional media efforts all have the same key messages and are all positioned in the same way. And this leads me to the next point, which is during COVID, what a lot of companies were able to do and have done is they kind of paused and they thought about, okay, who was our target customer? Do we like them? Are they the greatest generator of revenue for us? Or is there somebody else that we can go after? Or do we feel like we've saturated our primary target market? And is there a secondary or even a tertiary that we can go after? Another thing that has come out is the importance of building relationships virtually. And again, this is hard in an industry that is based upon face-to-face conversation, in-person face-to-face conversation. And as I told you guys earlier, one of the things that I hated prior to COVID was Zoom meetings. I saw no need for it. But now I love them. And I feel like if someone doesn't turn their camera on, I'm like, wait, what's going on? Like, they should turn their camera on. It's weird. Like, what are they hiding? And I will call people out on it, and they don't like that. But anyway, so, how can we do the same thing that we've done and using Zoom, or whatever other platform you use to try to build and connect those relationships. And then, as importantly, now that things are somewhat calming down, how can you go out and safely meet people face to face in person? Another big thing that's come out is leadership platforms, authored articles, webinars, doing it in a strategic way. I'm sure everybody on this call knows people that post way too much. And then there are people that don't post enough, or you wanted to hear more and they don't post that much. It's what we've learned is there's a delicate balance between overposting and underposting. And it's all very specific on who you are and what your company does, or who you are and what brand you represent. And I can't tell you, and Dr. Pooja can't tell you what the ideal formula is. It all depends upon what you're trying to achieve. But what the pandemic showed us and has continued to show us is it's important to try. And it's important to leverage some of these platforms because it helps keep the name of the client or the person in the mind of the target market and ultimately the media. And then the final point is that things can be done virtually. Like, look at this conference, ICAN4, 10-day conference about media, first one in the world. Whoever thought you could do a 10-day conference? And I have to tell you, I presented on the 3rd, and here we are on the 5th, and we still have a ton of people that have dialed in. So people aren't losing interest. And I think that's really important to acknowledge, because this conference is going to be an example of what can be done, right? So apply that to a company and its product. You can do a virtual product launch, and it's probably going to cost you a lot less if you do it virtually. And you can tweak your strategy immediately if it's not working well. So despite all the challenges that this pandemic caused us all, there was also a lot of thinking and rethinking about what we do and how we do it. And some of the tactics and strategies have been revised in a great direction. Dr. Pooja, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I think I would just like to say that, the core of public relations still remain that, PR practitioners are storytellers. They are the guardians of the brand. They will create engaging content. Earlier, it was very restricted to traditional media. Now there are multiple platforms, different tools. So, that is what we need to understand, that the core of PR still remains the same, but it's just the tools and the platforms that are expanding. So I think this talks about the future of public relations post-COVID. So, when we reached out to the practitioners, they said that, and 70% of these PR people said that the industry is actually, the future of this industry is positive. It's excellent. So when we wanted to understand that, what is it that will happen in the future? So if you see on the right, these are the pointers that they shared. They said that the traditional PR will lose its charm. Some of these points have already been covered in the previous slides, but it's just recapturing. And the PR tools like social media will be the next big thing. People will look into doing digital marketing, digital PR, and so there will be less reliance on the earlier traditional PR tools. So yeah, so this slide is more like a capturing of whatever we've already discussed so far. Yes. Kathryn, do you want to add anything, or we could move?
No, we can move, and I think we can take it right into this next slide. So building on what Pooja was just saying, so what does the future of the industry look like? Most people think it looks bright, and I have to say I completely agree. So John Del Libero, who's another very senior person here in the US, says the future of PR looks bright since PR practitioners proved how vital they are to an organization's operations. I believe we will see a push for organizations to grow their in-house capabilities rather than solely rely on a firm. and let me just sort of give you that a little bit of a context on that quote. So in the United States, it's not unpopular to have one PR person internally in a company, and then you outsource the majority of the work to an external PR firm. I agree with John's point. I think that given the importance of PR, given how PR helped so many brands navigate this pandemic, that what you're going to see is a shift in funds, shifts in budgets from external to internal. So rather than just having that one person internally who does PR as part of a larger communications responsibility, you're probably going to see more companies, big and small, employ more people internally. So they can always have a team focused on building and, more importantly, sustaining the brand through the good and the bad. All right, next slide. All right, PR recommendations to businesses who are on the verge of shutting down. Dr. Pooja, you want to take this one?
As all of you are already aware that, there were a lot of businesses that got shut down during the pandemic. Some of them, there were a lot of startups, who started up and then they couldn't survive. So we also asked this question to some of the PR practitioners on, what would be their recommendations to help the businesses who are on the verge of shutting down. So they said that, again, same thing, that, they need to be in the news. They need to use social media, and because it's cost effective, and they can do big campaigns on social media with less money. So they also said that, the kind of skill that was not really spoken about earlier, they said that PR people should be the problem solver for an organization. So while a PR person has always been an advisor, consultant, the guardian of the brand, this is one skill that the organizations are now looking for when it comes to managing a crisis. And obviously, pandemic was and is actually a big crisis, ongoing crisis. And so all the practitioners wanted to say that, if you want to stay relevant, stay in the news. And if you're not able to get regular stories, opt for online. Yeah. Kathryn, you want to add in?
I just going to say that I think, the way of thinking about this from the PR perspective and from the practitioner perspective is, if your brand is failing, how can you strategically use PR to help build it back up? And I think, all of these points here really support that idea. And, the thing is when you look at the cost of PR relative to marketing, relative to advertising, it is so much less. The cost, because essentially the only thing you're paying for is the PR practitioner, like Dr. Pooja, myself, or many of you. And that's it, right? Advertising is paid. Marketing is paid. PR is earned. And I can't underscore how incredibly important that is, especially if a company is failing. Because what we can do for a very sort of low cost is extraordinary relative to any advertising campaign or any social media marketing campaign. And so, it's one of those things where if you're ever in a company, and I've been there, so this is why I sort of talk about this so passionately, where they're threatening to get rid of you because they view you as a cost center, but they're going to keep the advertising person. I would argue that the media, the earned media is so much more valuable than advertising. And what I found in some research that I did for one of my books was that 88% of consumers, 88% look to earned media. So they look what's in, the Economic Times, or they look in what's in the Times of India, or the Wall Street Journal, or the New York Times, or to CNN. They look to see what those outlets say about a product or about a company before making a purchase. There is not data at all like that about advertising. There's no comparable data. Most people ignore ads. So why pay money for something that people ignore, where you can put your money in to a focus, PR, that makes a difference in the mind of the consumer. And again, to a brand that's failing, that's incredibly important to point out. Okay, next slide. So future skills required to enter the PR industry. And Dr. Pooja so elegantly puts it that, as PR people, we are the guardian of the brand. I love that. I'm gonna have to quote you on that one. It's so elegant. But anyway, so, we've both talked about this, but storytelling is such an important trait. And, in all of my conversations with colleagues all over the world for this research and for one of my books, that is the one thing that all of us have said was, what we do and what we love to do is tell stories. And, it's not a story like, Little Red Riding Hood or anything like that. It's a story about a company, and it's a story about a brand. And it's a story about why the company and why the brand matter to the mind of to the consumer. And the story has a couple of parts. In many ways, a story in PR is like a movie, right? You have actors, you have directors, you have producers that all put it together. You as the PR person are kind of like the director because you pick the spokespeople and you pick the publication. You're kind of the producer as well because you're the one that's trying to figure out, okay, how are we going to put this whole thing together? And then you have the actors, which are the media and the spokespeople. And by telling the story well, and by putting those people and those forces together, you get your piece. And I can tell you as someone who really does love doing media, I have no greater thrill than reading a story that I placed, that I put together, that I worked with journalists to do in a publication. And I always, when I'm reading it, I always get this pit in my stomach because I'm like, oh God, I hope all the words are great. I hope the headline is good. I hope the conclusion is good. And sometimes it wasn't always the best, but most times it was. And there's such a joy that comes out of seeing a story like that. So storytelling is by far and away the most important skill. Another one, the 4 C's: creativity, communication, critical thinking, and collaboration. What we mean by that is it's important to be able to think on your feet. It's important to sit in a meeting, listen to what people are saying about a product, a service, a company, an executive, and to try to come up with that story, as I just talked about, to try to help everybody in the room or everybody on the Zoom screen think out of the box, and to say something like, have you ever considered, or have you given thought to such and such? Because that's our role. Our job is to be that out of the box force to get people to be creative and to think and to collaborate. Agility is super important. And again, agility in terms of communication, agility in terms of all facets of the industry. Research, you can't pitch without being smart. You can't pitch without having facts. You can't talk to a reporter in person without knowing everything about your company and, as importantly, everything about that journalist. Before you approach a journalist, it's super important to read online stuff that they've written. Find out their background. What industries have they covered in the past? Is this a new industry for them, or are they someone who spent 2 to 3 decades in the same sector? How do they write? Do they use a soft lead in their stories, or do they have a hard lead? What kind of words do they use? Do they use words that are straight editorial, or do they use words that editorialize as they're used? When I was global head of communications for a satellite company, we had a reporter at the Wall Street Journal, and he was notorious for editorializing through his objective coverage. So he would use words like beleaguered in his writing. Beleaguered is not a positive word. And so we had to work with him to explain to him how his stories, although as objective as they were trying to be, were in fact not. Problem solving. How can you get that story into that publication or onto CNN? How can you creatively do it, especially if the journalist or the editor or if the outlet doesn't want to talk to you? Or, as importantly, what if you can't find a spokesperson? What if your company is not willing to go out with that story, even though you know it's the right one? Social media. We've talked a lot about this during this presentation, but social media is so incredibly important, but every platform is not right for every company. Every platform is not right for every target market. So that's something that's incredibly important to know. And another thing is every platform is is not available. In the United States here, TikTok is incredibly important, but I know in India, TikTok is not available. All right. So if you're a musician in the United States, globally, especially in the US right now, most musicians pre-release a bit of their song on TikTok. If you're doing a global campaign and relying on TikTok, then as a musician, you're not going to be able to connect with people in India, where there are over 1 billion people. And that's kind of an important market. So it's important to understand how to use social media, what are the nuances and what are the challenges. Social skills, you need to be social. You need to be gregarious. You don't want to be obnoxious. You don't want to be rude. You need to be patient. There are many times you need to be humble. But part of what you do is you connect. You're a liaison. You're a representative between the company and the public. And you really do need to make sure you have great social skills to be able to do that and to facilitate the conversations that you need to do. And the last is multitasking. And I love this because I used to call it multi-level multitasking. There were days when I was in agency land where I had so much to do. It was overwhelming. But if you're in PR, you kind of thrive on that. Like most of us do better when we're busy. It's just how we're wired. And I always say that when I'm at a cocktail party, when they used to happen in person or some sort of meeting, I can always tell the other PR person in the room because we have this kind of energy and way of going about doing things that is usually much faster and much quicker than everybody else around us. So it's important that you be organized and that you know how to balance things and that you understand how to service a client and make them feel like they are the most important person in the world when you have 3 others you have to worry about. Dr. Pooja, what am I missing there?
Yeah, so I think the concept of, having the KRA defined, that, I'm just going to do this job and not this, doesn't really work in PR. And I think that is what the research has identified, as well as the PR practitioners have identified, that you need to be a multitasker. You need to do a lot of stuff. And that is how you're going to learn. If you're just going to stick to one thing, and if you say that, okay, I'm just going to do the content and I'm not going to do the relationship building with stakeholders, then you're going to be missing out. Then you're going to be missing out on the relationship with government, embassies, industry bodies that are actually important aspects other than the media relations. So I think it's like a whole package that one needs to work on and not really one aspect. Yes.
Completely agree.
So thank you very much. I think we've covered the entire presentation. And I think, Kathryn, we have some of the questions. We don't have much time, but I think we can take 2 questions. Let me just read them out. So the first question says, how have the journalists reacted to the shift of dependence from press releases to social media? Do you want to take that, Kathryn?
Sure, absolutely. So I think, it depends upon who the journalist is, right? So as I mentioned, when I was at the satellite company, the reporter that we worked with at the Journal has been covering the aviation industry for 30 years. He's used to press releases. And as much as you may think that he doesn't want a press release, he still does. So part of what is important to understand is you can't just make a blanket decision that you're going to stop doing press releases. You need to think about who your media is. And as we were saying before, most companies are electing to go the social media route because it's faster, it's easier, and it's definitely less expensive. But you still want to have in your back pocket that press release so that when you do have the journalist that still wants to see a release on it, you can easily email it to them. I think most of them welcome the changes because the speed of their jobs has increased, as we've talked about. The range of the companies they cover, the range of their beat has expanded. So the less they have to read, the probably the happier they're going to be, but you are going to find exceptions along the way who still want the traditional written materials.
I'll just add on, in this question. So, while the journalists love this idea of moving to social media, because I think most of them are now on Twitter, and they get all the ideas as well, for their stories on social media as well. But I think they also still need that ready-made content from the PR practitioner. So, I mean, earlier it was just kind of written traditional press release. but now they are demanding video press releases as well, like an audio press releases as well. So while they're happy about it, that's the reaction, but the PR practitioners, on the other hand, they have to work on all aspects. Yeah. So the next question is, do you feel Instagram incentives given to new brands during COVID has helped in their PR and growth? This is from Kshitij, student. Yeah.
I do. I mean, I know that in the United States, Instagram is incredibly popular with Gen Z and millennials. So where that age-wise that gets you people sort of between 15 and 28. It is the primary way that they discover new things. It is the primary way they learn about trends. Folks that are influencers on Instagram are incredibly popular. So I think it's helped a lot of companies. I think it's helped build brands very, very quickly. I mean, if you think about traditionally, like over the past 50 to 60 years, it used to take a long time for a company to build a brand, but now it can happen overnight. But likewise, what comes with that is it can also be canceled overnight. A very popular topic in the United States has been the concept of cancel culture, which I know most people, if not, know what that is. But basically, someone messes up, so you decide not to buy their product, not to read their news articles, whatever. And because of all the craziness that's gone on in the U.S. over the past year, it's become a pretty hot topic. So I think that the incentives Instagram gives are very, very helpful, especially to an emerging company. But if it isn't managed right, if it isn't handled right, it could actually blow up in their face. I think that's important to realize.
Absolutely. So we have other questions, but I'm not sure if we have that much time. But if Ms. Pandey could tell us.
We can take one or two more questions.
Okay, sure. So the other questions, and I think we've actually covered them, Kathryn, during our slides. One of them is, what are some of the changes that COVID-19 witnessed with respect to political PR specifically?
Okay, so political PR is different. Political PR, it's either a person or a party. And I would not use the United States as a very good example of this, because you all have seen what's been going on here over the past year. Things are starting to calm down. But when you are working as a PR person for a politician, it's very, very different, because you're not only supporting the person, but you're also supporting their beliefs relative to certain issues. So with COVID, and usually politicians, go face to face, talk to people in person, hear from their constituents what's important, and then theoretically decide their own perspective and position relative to what their constituents say. Doesn't always work that way, but that's the way theoretically it's supposed to work. So what's made it hard with COVID is those in-person conversations, those rallies, for the most part, did not happen. And so what that left was, it provided some politicians the ability to create falsities as to what their party stood for and what the issues were that matter. So again, with respect to political PR, I think that people are very much welcoming the reopening of the world and the ability to see these politicians interacting with the public, and the ability to have the reporter stand up next to that politician with that microphone in that hand and get them to speak impromptu, to get their real perspective on something. Because everything with COVID was so rehearsed, right? We couldn't get the politician coming off of the steps of the Capitol or wherever and have the media talk to them directly. Everything was timed. Everything was calculated. So I think what you're going to see going forward, hopefully, is more realism in the space, and the ability to really understand more who the true politician is, as opposed to who the unrehearsed politician is, or who the rehearsed politician is. And going with that, for PR people, I think if you represent a politician or you represent a government, there's, now that we're coming out of this, it's more important to realize that everything can't be as calculated and rehearsed as it was during COVID. And you need to focus on what the real issues are, as opposed to what someone is telling you that they are.
Absolutely. Last question that we can take is, how has crisis communication changed post the pandemic?
So I think Dr. Pooja mentioned this earlier, which was crisis was something that was kind of done, right? But now it's something that everyone has. And we, I know when I worked for my satellite company that crisis was something that I did every day because of the nature of our business, but that's not the case for every company. So I think what the pandemic has done for companies that didn't have a crisis plan, it's caused them to write one. For companies that had one that they didn't really use, it's caused them to put it front and center. And for companies that had one that they used, it's caused them to reevaluate it and to make sure that it's buttoned up and that it's executable. So the next time something happens, be it a global pandemic or something else, it doesn't need to be turned on. It's already a part of what their normal operations are. And I think that's really important. Dr. Pooja, what am I missing on that one?
No, you've covered everything. Don't worry. All right. So I think we come to the end of this session. So over to you, Ms. Pandey.
Thank you, Ms. Lancioni and Dr. Arora, for talking in detail on how the PR industry has adopted newer strategies in its approach to deal with COVID situation, and how hopeful is the industry in its outlook. So all the insights of the research are going to be very fruitful in explaining how PR underwent a change as a result of the pandemic. Now I request Dr. Sushmita Bala, Head DME Media School and Associate Convener of the conference, to share her thoughts on the session.
Thank you, Krishna ma'am. Thanks, Kathryn and Dr. Pooja, for updating what changes have taken place in PR in post-COVID time. Also, you talked about how the pandemic has affected the life of PR professionals. I'm sure that students have benefited. Thank you. Thanks to all of you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Now I invite Ishika Wadhwa to give her thanks note.
I would like to extend my gratitude to Professor Dr. Amrit Saxena, Dean DME Media School, Convener, ICAN4, and Professor Dr. Susmita Bala, Head DME Media School, Chief Associate Convener for ICAN4, for the ideation and planning of all the sessions. I would like to thank Dr. Manaswi Maheshwari, Ms. Manmeet Kaur, Ms. Shruti V.S., Mr. Mohit Kishore Vats, Ms. Mudita Raj, and Mr. Pramod Kumar Pandey for their constant support and guidance. A heartfelt thanks to Mr. Ritik Ghosh, Mr. Sumantra Sarthi Das, Mr. Sachin Nair, and Mr. Yogesh Sharma for managing the overall digital operations in ICAN4. I would like to thank our newsletter team comprising of both students and faculty members, namely Ms. Sukriti Arora and Dr. Tina Bora, for constantly supervising and mentoring everyone. And I'd also like to thank Mr. Mohammed Kamil and Ms. Krishna Pandey for working around the clock in all the press proceedings. You can keep a check on our press proceedings on the official Facebook page of ICAN. I would like to thank Mr. Anmol Mehta from our DME family and Mr. Sumohit Nirala from our knowledge partners, Kyar Manglam University's End, for tirelessly working in making our events look more beautiful digitally with the help of his prolific designs. I would also like to thank our entire team, all faculty members and students who have worked day and night facing all the challenges and obstacles of the pandemic to make this conference happen. Lastly, I would like to thank all our participants who have joined the session, worked so hard on their research papers, and our audience for being here and contributing. Dear participants, I request you to please take out a minute and fill the feedback form through the link provided in the chat box. Your every feedback matters to us. Thank you. I would request everyone to follow our social media handles for more updates and information. Do not forget to visit the DME website and the ICAN4 micro website for any or all details. Do join us for more interesting sessions lined up. First we have is the second panel discussion on Asian Celebrity Today, a roundtable discussion with Professor Sean Redmond, Deakin University, Melbourne, Australia, chairing the panel. He will be taking the discussion forward with Ms. Rio Katayama, University of Southern California, East Asian Languages and Cultures, Los Angeles, USA. Dr. Vikrant Kishore, Senior Lecturer, Screen and Design, Deakin University, Melbourne, Australia. Dr. Sojiang Park, Assistant Research Professor, Department of Communication, Seoul National University, South Korea. Dr. Jian Zhu, a Senior Lecturer in Communication and co-convener of the Asian Media and Cultural Studies Network at Deakin University, Melbourne, Australia. The panel discussion will be followed by a technical session on OTT and web series in the phase of COVID-19 pandemic and lockdowns. We will have a masterclass on digitalization and broadcast media by Mr. R.K. Singh, ICT and broadcast media consultant and former engineer-in-chief, Doordarshan, New Delhi, India. This will be followed by a panel discussion in the evening on technological innovations and the future of media education with a galaxy of experts discussing the issue. So wishing you all thank you for participating and a great day ahead tomorrow. Thank you so much for being a part of ICAN4.